Thank you, Faith, and the team at NDC and NAAC for putting together such a wonderful virtual town hall meeting today. It's been, as Jen said, a little more than a year since the pandemic began, and surviving remains hard. Rebuilding seems like a daunting task. And so we're grateful for Faith and for her team for choosing this topic this year for this year's conference. For my portion of the program, we have a distinguished panel of experts to talk about the impact of low-income programs for important utility and broadband services. We're here and we will hear from Commissioner Shiroma today from the CPUC and representatives from both PG&E and T-Mobile about what their companies and what the agency is doing to help during the COVID-19 crisis. But first, before I begin, let me say how horrified and saddened I am personally by what has happened in the Asian American community in recent weeks, and really since, in many respects, since the pandemic began. Demonizing a people for something they didn't cause, and for a pandemic that has equally devastated their community is both wrong and repugnant. The killing of 8 people in Atlanta last week, 6 of them Asian Americans, is horrifying. According to the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at Cal State San Bernardino, anti-Asian hate crime has more than doubled during the pandemic. The shooting in Atlanta added to those fears, and I'm here to tell you that we stand with the Asian American community. Finally, before I get started, let me remind everyone that with the presence of Commissioner Shiroma on today's panel, we have to follow certain rules to remain within the bounds of our legal obligations. I want to remind everyone that it's important to avoid discussing details of CPUC rate-making proceedings that are open or are subject to rehearing applications. If such proceedings are discussed as part of the presentations or the Q&A, parties or interested persons involved in those discussions will be subject to CPUC reporting requirements under Rule 8.3. We also have an outright ban against discussing any open adjudicatory proceedings. And so to avoid any of these limitations or implications, it's therefore better to address your questions more generally. So first, let me introduce the panelists very briefly, and I'm going to ask them to explain a little bit about themselves and to discuss briefly and generally how they're working to address affordability for low-income consumers, particularly during the pandemic. So to start things off, let me introduce Commissioner Genevieve Shiroma. Governor Newsom appointed Commissioner Shiroma to the CPUC on January 22nd, 2019. Prior to joining the commission, she served as a member of the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, and before that as chief of the Air Quality Branch at the California Air Resources Board. Commissioner Shiroma, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Good morning, everyone. And thank you to the National Diversity Coalition. Thank you, Chair Sung, for your opening remarks. Adam, it's a pleasure to be here with you today to discuss the California Public Utility Commission's response to address the unprecedented health and economic impact that COVID-19 has had on Californians, especially the most vulnerable customers. Now, thank you, Adam, for your words on support for the Asian and Pacific Islander community. Since the start of the pandemic, there has been an increase in racist rhetoric and violence towards Asians and Pacific Islanders. What happened last week was indeed horrific. Over the last year, the national organization Stop AAPI Hate received almost 3,800 reported hate incidences. And they found that women were targeted 2.3 times more than men. As an Asian American woman myself, this is very personal. With decades of racism and xenophobia in the lead up to World War II, 120,000 mostly West Coast Japanese Americans were incarcerated in concentration camps behind barbed wire, leaving behind homes, businesses, belongings, pets in the aftermath of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Now, despite this, my parents, who were born and raised in the Hawaiian Islands, were teenagers living in Honolulu when Pearl Harbor was bombed. They came to California as a young married couple in the 1950s with my older brother. They rented a room, and one day the landlady said to my mother, "After we were so good to you people, how could you stab us in the back and bomb Pearl Harbor?" My mother said she cried tears of anger, managed to tell the landlady how dare she blame my mother for the bombing. My mother is an American who was living in Hawaii, had nothing to do with the bombing, and furthermore, her husband, my dad, served in the US Army. Her brother, my uncle, had been a US Army sergeant, killed in action in the Korean War, a hero awarded 2 Silver Stars posthumously just a few years earlier. Now, Asian Americans have been a critical aspect of the nation's diverse economy and forward-thinking policies. Now, I encourage everyone here to educate themselves, condemn racism, xenophobia. The recently issued report by Stop AAPI Hate is a great starting point, and it can be found at one word, stopaapihate.org. Now, at this point, I want to turn to say thank you to Faith Bautista and the board of the National Diversity Coalition for inviting the California Public Utility Commission and myself to participate in this town hall. I want to thank the National Diversity Coalition's Prachi Kohli, Ariel McCarty, and Debbie Lee Ruiz for organizing the panel. Thank you to Ryan today, who's making sure this is all operating well for the viewers. And Adam, I'm really pleased to join you as our facilitator for today's panel, and fellow panelists, Robert Kenney of Pacific Gas and Electric and Dr. Kiesha Taylor of T-Mobile. Now, let me turn to how did I become a commissioner? What is the PUC, and what are some of our key initiatives? After the experience that I just described, my parents ended up in a small town called Campo, just outside of Lodi. That's where my journey started. My dad was a farm worker. My dad has a high school diploma, a little bit of college, but back in those days, that was the kind of work that he was able to garner, farm work. We were very poor. When I was born, they were living in a barn with electricity, a propane stove, no indoor plumbing. That was more common than not back in those days. My mother eventually was able to get a job with San Joaquin County in Stockton. Through all of this, they really taught me the value, as many of those of you who are attending today, I'm sure experienced similarly, the value of hard work, the importance of public service. So I attended San Joaquin Delta Community College, and I was able to garner a really good scholarship that allowed me to go to the University of California at Davis. There, I earned a bachelor's degree in material science and engineering. And for the past 43 years, I have spent my time working in state service and also along the way, having the opportunity to volunteer in the community, to get involved with nonprofits who are helping vulnerable and disadvantaged communities. The first 20 years of my career were at the California Air Resources Board. I held several positions, as Adam outlined. I worked on reducing air pollution from industry, including power plants. I then got appointed by then Governor Gray Davis to the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, the Farm Worker Labor Board. I think that was in large part because of my life story, growing up as a farm worker daughter, coupled with my experience working in state government. Now, along the way, I ran for office and I served on our local community-owned utility board, SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Utility District. I thought I'd run a couple times, but I ended up running 5 times, serving 20 years as an elected. I really felt that that was my community service. SMUD is one of the 10 largest publicly owned utilities in the United States. They are vertically integrated with power plants, hydroelectricity. They serve 640,000 customers and I gained quite a bit of experience in the energy field there. So really based on the collective experience at the Air Resources Board, the Ag Labor Relations Board, SMUD, my life experience, Governor Newsom saw fit to appoint me to the California Public Utilities Commission 2 years ago. And so what is the commission? And I'm glad you asked. The California Public Utilities Commission is the largest state utility regulator in the nation. We regulate essential services, energy, both electricity and natural gas, water, communications, transportation, rail and passenger, and the overall safety of utility customers. There are 5 of us who serve. We're all appointed by the governor. And the mission of the CPUC is to empower California through access to safe, clean, and affordable, very important, affordable utility services and infrastructure. We acknowledge that some populations absolutely face higher barriers in accessing safe and affordable utility services. In February of 2019, one of the first votes I took was to adopt, along with the other commissioners, the Environmental and Social Justice Action Plan, which provides a roadmap to improve services to targeted communities across California, communities that are suffering from more air pollution, who have a higher percentage of low-income customers, tribal communities, disadvantaged communities. Now, at the commission, I am the lead commissioner on about 80 formal proceedings. Each of us carry about that kind of workload. We also vote on everyone else's proceedings. It spans, again, electricity, gas, telecommunications, transportation, and water. I happen to lead the microgrids and resiliency proceeding, the rulemakings over transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft, the California Lifeline discount program and broadband program, the California Alternative Rates for Energy, the Energy Savings Assistance Program, also the Customer Energy Investment Financing rulemaking, energy efficiency rulemaking, and I'm also lead on the number of major general rate cases, rate designs for energy and water, including for Southern California Edison and for the California American Water Company. I also serve as the commission's representative on the Low Income Oversight Board. I serve as co-chair of the CPUC's Emerging Trends Committee, Finance and Administration Committee, and Internal Audits Committee. Now, if that's not enough, in 2020, I was selected as Secretary Treasurer of the Western Conference of Public Service Commissioners of the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, or NARUC. And I was also appointed to serve on the NARUC Emergency Preparedness, Recovery, and Resiliency Task Force and the Subcommittee on State and National Preparedness to COVID-19, where we're really looking at a national level to provide the playbook on what do you do should we have another pandemic, another emergency situation as we have at hand now. I have a good team that supports me. Just to outline a few of our low-income programs, I mentioned that I'm lead on several of these. We have a utility bill discount program, the California Alternative Rates for Energy Care. It provides monthly discounts of up to 35% on electricity, 20% for gas. And there are ways to qualify for those discounts. It's been very important during the pandemic. In addition, there is the Family Electric Rate Assistance, or FERA, which provides discounts up to 18% for a household of 3 or more. You can have a higher earning level to qualify for that program. All of these are income qualified. On the water side, there are also low income programs that provide discount service to income qualified customers. We also have a medical baseline program that the investor-owned utilities, and Robert may speak to this a little more. And there, it is not income driven. It is whether you have electrically powered medical equipment, and you can qualify for a discount. On the telecommunications side, the California Lifeline program provides discounts on phone service, voice service, and also this past fall, we added in a broadband feature, both a free feature and also an affordable feature. Now, we also have the Weatherization, Appliance and Equipment Installation Program. We refer to that as the ESA program, Energy Savings and Assistance Program. This helps income qualified customers not only help reduce our greenhouse gas footprint, but also provide for health, comfort, and safety. And this is through energy efficient appliances, weatherization, and we are in the middle of a proceeding to update that whole program. I also wanted to mention the Self-Generation Incentive Program, SGIP. This is a battery program. It provides rebates for income qualified customers, covering about 85% of the cost, in some cases covering all the cost, especially for people living in high fire threat areas, communities experiencing. Out here in California, we have public safety power shutoffs to prevent fires. There we are really focusing in on the low-income customers, the medically vulnerable customers. And while we are focusing on the low-income programs here, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our GEO 156 program, our Diversity Supplier program, which has been in place now for almost over 40 years, well, almost 40 years. A tremendous program that the investor-owned utilities carry out in terms of assuring that there is diversity in the contracting that they are doing across California. Many of the companies are exceeding the requirements. Requirements right now are 21.5% of all contracting should go to diverse contractors, and many of the companies are exceeding that contracting. So I will stop there. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about not only myself, but about the CPUC, and I look forward to the conversation.
Great. Well, thank you, Commissioner Shiroma. And I know supplier diversity is something that's very important to Faith and very important to NDC and NAAC. So thank you for mentioning that. Thank you for the overview of the programs, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those as we move through the program. But also thank you for the more extensive background, and especially your personal story, which was both interesting to hear and gives, I think, context for why you do what you do. So thank you so much. Next, we have Dr. Kiesha Taylor. Dr. Taylor serves as Senior National Education Administrator for T-Mobile. She has 16 years of experience as both an educator, an administrator, and a consultant working to reduce the digital divide. So she has many perspectives on this issue. In her role with T-Mobile, she leads their project 10 Million, which is an initiative I'm sure she's going to talk more about in a moment. So Dr. Taylor, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Adam, and thank you, Commissioner Shiroma and Faith, just for the opportunity to stand beside you on this panel, National Diversity Coalition. As an avid advocate for student-centered, community-based reform, digital equity, expanded opportunities for student success, I've really dedicated my career to strengthening private-public partnerships and structuring programs that demonstrate a strategic investment into the children and families that need us the most. And as you can imagine, having the opportunity to lead T-Mobile's education strategy, most recently, as you mentioned, Adam, Project 10 Million's $10.7 billion commitment. It's been a real career highlight. As a first generation college graduate myself, and now 2020 FCC's Digital Equity Honoree of the Year, and providing critical internet connectivity to over 2 million students during the pandemic. I'm really honored to speak about internet connectivity and the needs of the students in our most vulnerable populations. So, as a forever educator, education thought sponsor, and a student community advocate, I'm here to align with T-Mobile's promise to K-12 students in need. And I'm excited to be included on the panel again, besides such highly esteemed panelists. And thank you again for sharing the stage with me.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Taylor, and we're going to hear a lot more from you about what T-Mobile's doing in a few moments. It's Women's History Month, so we had to let our women leaders go first. And so finally, Robert Kenney. Mr. Kenney is PG&E's Vice President of Regulatory and External Affairs. And in that role, he's responsible for the company's federal, state, and local government affairs activities, community relations, and communications. He's also a former chair of the Missouri Public Service Commission and has more than 20 years of experience litigating complex cases at the federal, state, and administrative levels. We're really happy to have you here today. Welcome, Mr. Kenney.
There we go. Adam, thank you very much. And just before I jump into my remarks, I want to just thank Commissioner Shiroma and Dr. Taylor and you, Adam, for facilitating this fantastic discussion. And I also want to thank Jen, Sung, and Faith Bautista for the important work that you do with NDC, you and all the board. And thank you for inviting us. It's a privilege to be able to be here with you today. And just a little before I further jump into our remarks, I think the topic is extraordinarily timely. We are living in challenging times, and I want to acknowledge on behalf of PG&E and on my behalf personally, the way that we stand strong with our brothers and sisters in the AAPI community. I have been shocked and horrified and saddened by the rhetoric that we've seen over the last many years, and that it has culminated in physical violence and fear and terror for our fellow citizens. It breaks my heart. And I just want all of the listeners to know that we stand strong in solidarity with our Asian American Pacific Islander brothers and sisters in condemning violence and hate. With that, again, I work for a utility, and I've also had the privilege of serving on a state public utilities commission. And when my time expired on the commission, I was fortunate enough to be able to have the opportunity to move to California and join PG&E. And I very explicitly wanted to stay in this industry because we are a force for good. And I do believe and I do see my work at PG&E as an extension of the public service that I've spent my career doing, both on the commission and in other public sector positions. We do provide an essential and critical service. And I think that bears repeating. It's essential and critical to the human condition, to our quality of life, to our ability to extend the hours in which we have light so that we can study. I mean, the advent of electricity and the provision of natural gas have radically altered the human condition in ways that many other, maybe other than the wheel, have not. And so it's a privilege and honor for me to be able to continue my obligation to serve by working for PG&E and working in this industry. I will not get into great detail with all the specific programs that Commissioner Shiroma highlighted, except to say that those programs have become even more important in the context of COVID-19. And I'll talk a little bit more about specific things that PG&E has been doing in response to COVID-19. But we do recognize, just as a general proposition, that the provision of these utility services has increased. The costs have increased over the last many years. COVID-19 has really brought it into stark contrast in how it impacts particular communities more acutely. But we recognize that, and we're very supportive of the programs that Commissioner Shiroma outlined, specifically CARE, FARA, the REACH program, LIHEAP, ESA, SGIP, all of those programs that are explicitly designed to make the provision of utility services more affordable. In the context specifically of COVID, I would like to just piggyback a little bit on what Dr. Taylor was talking about. We've seen the digital divide. We've seen the consequences of it. It has existed for a very long time, but we've seen in stark contrast the consequences of it as we have gone to a remote learning environment. I am pleased that PG&E has acted as a supporter of our most vulnerable communities by donating money to the California Education Foundation and by donating money to local school districts to help bridge the digital divide by being able to buy mobile hotspots and laptops for those children in those school districts that have not been able to afford it. We most recently donated $750,000 to schools for funding digital divide programs. And I say that to say that beyond just the provision of the essential services that we provide, and beyond just being a corporation, we are members of our communities. We are citizens of our communities, and good corporate citizenship demands that when we see a problem, we help solve it. And so I'm very pleased to be here to have this important conversation, and I'm very pleased to represent PG&E as we talk through how we're working to help our most vulnerable citizens.
Great. Well, thank you, Robert. Really appreciate you being here and for reminding us of the importance of corporate social responsibility as well, and being part of the communities that we serve. And I appreciate all of you giving us a little bit of background, both about yourselves and about what you do in your roles. Let me start the questioning by asking you, Commissioner Shiroma, about COVID-19. More specifically, you talked about a lot of the programs that are available through the commission. But one of the interesting things with the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders is that it required people to change their lifestyles by staying indoors to reduce the spread of the virus. That resulted in many people either losing their jobs or having their hours or pay reduced. And at the same time, it probably led to more electric usage in their home because they were in fact at home. Can you provide some more specifics about how the CPUC has responded to this, and maybe elaborate a little bit more on some of the programs that have specific impact to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes, thank you. Gosh, a little over a year ago, who knew? I think, in the lead to the orders on staying at home, we were becoming more aware of the COVID-19, and back to the personal, on my way home from one of my trips to the San Francisco office, and you can see it in the background there. I live in Sacramento. There was already the anti-Asian rhetoric. And I honestly wondered, as I got onto the Amtrak train, was anyone going to sit next to me because I'm Asian? It is a real thing for any of us who are Asian and Pacific Islander. And Also, in around that time, the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, you know, I shook up with the emotion of the horrific things that happened at that time. And now here we are a year later, and things have gotten worse in terms of who we are as a country. But yet I am optimistic for the future because of communities rallying around. And my CPUC family working very closely with the investor-owned utilities such as Roberts to problem solve. So very quickly on March 4th, Governor Newsom declared the state of emergency, and we at the CPUC quickly did a number of things, such as putting a moratorium on disconnections. That was very key. The moratorium would have come off at the end of this month, but we extended it to the end of June because we collectively felt that more needed to be done to ease people back into being able to pay their bills. And it is a major feat because the utilities are experiencing an increase in what we call arrearages in terms of the people who are not able to pay their bills. On the water, both municipal and our regulated water utilities, there is $1 billion of debt. Right? Same thing on the energy side for our regulated utilities. There is a payment program that will kick into gear once the moratorium comes off. And so the utilities just presented to us their plans for the marketing, education, and outreach to help those customers who have gotten behind, some substantially behind, but have gotten behind in paying their bills. And so what we did was to work on a framework, first provide immediate relief, and then to provide for a framework to how do we get back to normal. We did a number of other things too. As the summer season was approaching, the education about energy efficiency, what people could do to lower their electricity bills, their gas bills, more, like substantially as we were heading towards summer, the electricity bills. We also did some granular things. There's something called a high usage charge, and we lowered that charge. We also have something called a climate credit, which is based on the utilities' work to lower their greenhouse gas footprint. And in doing that, there is a climate credit that customers receive to help offset their bills. So we timed some of that to help out with those initial months as people were getting used to working from home, getting more used to some energy efficiency things, looking at how they use their electricity during the day, and then to ease into that summer season. Now, in California, we're coping with a lot insofar as wildfires, public safety, power shutoffs, and last year, 2 days of lower reserves than we had thought was going to happen. And so there were a number of hours of blackouts, which was quite shocking to us. But in and around all that, we have really worked to keep the communication through Roberts Company and the other investor-owned utilities to assure at least people know what they can avail of, and they knew that no one was going to be shut off for their power needs. So I'll stop there. And
thank you. I appreciate that very much. And I do want to remind people that if you have a question and want to ask it, we will get to a point in the program where that's possible. So please feel free to add it into the chat, and we're monitoring that for questions from the audience. Let me ask both of you, Dr. Taylor and Mr. Kenney, can you explain how these programs that Commissioner Shiroma talked about impacted your companies? I know that there are specifically the sort of moratorium on disconnects. And I'll start with you and other programs that are available through the PUC. Mr. Kenney, how have public utility suppliers like PG&E been able to adapt to an increased need for utility discounts? And what resources are available to consumers to help, alleviate some of the higher utility bills that people are facing as they're spending more time at home?
Adam, thank you for the question, and Commissioner Shiroma did a fantastic job of providing the overview. I just, as a threshold matter, we recognize that the health and safety of our customers and our employees and the communities we serve is our primary responsibility. That's first and foremost. And as we moved into the pandemic, we recognized that the hardships that customers may have already been facing were going to become exacerbated by COVID-19. And that led to many of our customers facing financial uncertainty and financial instability due to job loss, school and childcare closures, and other significant economic impacts. And so we were pleased to be able to work constructively with the PUC. And last March, we implemented a series of emergency protections, including the suspension of service disconnections for non-payment. We waived security deposits, and we've been heavily marketing and implementing flexible payment plan options, and then providing additional support for our low income and medical baseline customers in particular. And as Commissioner Shiroma indicated, those emergency protections were originally expected to expire in April and have been expanded to June. We've seen our care enrollment grow from 96% of the eligible population to over 110% of the estimated eligible population. So we think that greater than 100% number is attributable to the fact that we either have customers who may not qualify who are on the program, or the estimates of the eligible population is understated. And this will be reconciled once we resume post-enrollment verification. In addition, our FARA applications have grown from 13 to 24% of the population. And we have also increased efforts to encourage our customers who are doing well to increase their support to the REACH program. So I think Commissioner Shiroma described the REACH program. That's a program that is funded by customers, and we also help fund it as well. But it provides emergency bill assistance to customers who need it in advance of a disconnection. And we currently have approximately $1 million available from donations from customers and employees each year, and we're attempting to increase that. As we continue to respond to the ongoing crisis, we are continually looking for additional ways to help during these times. We've seen a significant increase in past due bills for our residential accounts that increased by about 85% between March and December of last year. And our total residential past due amount has increased from $531 million in 2020, or this year rather, in 2021, compared to this same time last year, when it was $283 million. And so I just tell that for you to get an idea of the magnitude of what we're seeing and the significant number of past due amounts that we're seeing. We've also suspended post-enrollment verification and re-enrollment verifications for care and FARA. So typically a customer has to verify their income. We've waived that. We're waiving security deposits for both residential and small customers. And then we, Commissioner Shiroma referenced the medical baseline program for customers with qualifying medical conditions. They get a lower monthly rate on their energy bills, and we've suspended the recertification process for that eligibility as well. Typically, a customer would have to get certified through their doctor or a medical provider. So we're allowing them to re-enroll without certification, and we're allowing new customers to enroll without authorization. So those are a handful of the specific things that we're doing to provide increased support for vulnerable customers, particularly during COVID.
Well, that's a lot. So thank you. Appreciate it. And I'm sure if people have questions, I know how to get in touch with Robert and his team to find out more about those things. Let me turn to you, Dr. Taylor, and ask about T-Mobile as a representative myself of a broadband provider in the state. I know that we're obviously following the CPUC requirements, but then there have also been some national commitments that companies like ours have made voluntarily during the course of the pandemic. Can you speak about what T-Mobile is doing specifically when it comes to helping consumers with issues paying their bills? And then, obviously in the remote education space and the need for more remote education, I know that T-Mobile has got a lot going on in that regard. Maybe talk a little bit about the challenges of the most at-risk students, given the need for distance learning, and again, what T-Mobile is specifically doing to address those issues.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And just want to start off by saying, I share the sentiments of our CEO, Mike Sievert, when, we think about specifically as it relates to the Asian community, the racist, violent acts that have happened, and it's particularly in the last 12 months, right? And, when we think about that, it's not just a call to action in that moment. It's really a call to sit and say, how are we going to adjust our business practices and the way that we interact with our communities in a way that is really responsive to what's happening and what they're currently facing. And that's why it's so important for us to continue to gather in these settings, to work together as partners, such as the National Diversity Coalition, and just thinking about the work that's been driven by Faith Bautista. She's the chairman of T-Mobile's California Externity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council. And with the great work that she's done, we've connected over 500,000 students across California. That is tremendous. Think about the type of impact that has on the learning community. When this pandemic initially started, educators and the education community and T-Mobile as a whole, we just were thinking about the basic right and the access to education, and what position we needed to have in that, right? And so we're committed to that. And I look forward to sharing more, and I will share more in just a second, the steps T-Mobile's taken to be more inclusive, promote diversity, and to provide access and resources and to technology and equitable access across the country. We're also working with other amazing partners, AAPI leaders from OCA, AAJC, Rachel Chong, and Cal Asian Chamber. So we've had a lot of really great relationships and conversations to think about how we really want to impact the space, right? Specifically, how we want to impact students and how we want to impact the communities that need us the most. T-Mobile has launched Project 10 Million ahead of schedule. At the start of the pandemic, we immediately rolled out pandemic response programs. And so we upgraded our traditional customers' hotspots to make sure that they were able to access internet for their students and even for those who are working remotely, so they can use their phone as a hotspot. We also jumped in. There were several supply chain issues, and there still are. Those supply chain concerns persist across many of our technology vendors. And we stepped up and really worked hard to modify, how we were providing the accessibility, whether it was a hotspot or using a phone as a hotspot or some other type of device. We started immediately working with our partners in the space, so Apple and Microsoft and Google and all these wonderful partners who could step in and say, hey, we want to be a part of the mission. And we expedited, like I said, Project 10 Million, which is this $10.7 billion infusion into the education space. And it really is there to provide free hotspots and free or low-cost connectivity to students that have the need. And that need is based on the National School Lunch Program, And we really worked to roll that program out. So before the program launched, we had already connected 2 million students. So it really was to say, you know, this is not a strategic business play so much as it is a strategic investment into the families and communities that need us the most. And so we launched the program, and it provides K-12 students with free or highly subsidized mobile internet. We've thus far, 4,000 school districts have taken advantage of T-Mobile for Education offers. And through Project 10 Million, since September, we've connected over 400,000 students. So this is, you know, you think about how all these numbers align, and it's easy to say 2 million, or it's easy to say 500,000 in California, an additional 400,000 through Project 10 Million. But the core part of that is really the investment, right? T-Mobile stepping in, like Mr. Kenney was saying a moment ago, stepping up to our responsibility as a great corporate partner, right? And saying, we want to be a part of the solution. We notice what's happening. And we don't only want to talk about how much we notice what's happening, right? It's not sitting from a seat of affluency or privilege. It's us sitting and saying, hey, we want to be a part of this solution. And that's really what Project 10 Million seeks to accomplish. So Adam, we stepped up immediately and made some changes to the core access that our customers had across the board. We also stepped up and looked at capacity and network from a very special lens to make sure that we could accommodate all of these new users. And in the process of the pandemic, we also completed our merger with Sprint. So there was a lot done there just to make sure that we were aligned with providing additional accessibility, and not only accessibility in a way where it's not impactful. Project 10 Million is a 5-year commitment to every single student that receives a free hotspot. That means for 5 years, year over year, each student household that's eligible will receive a free hotspot that first year, and then 100 gigs of high-speed internet access every single year for 5 years, right? That is amazing. That commitment is just unbelievable. And it's available through schools, right? We work directly with school districts who know their populations. They know where the needs are. Or it's available directly through the consumer channel. So any T-Mobile store, which sits all over these neighborhoods, all over the country, a parent with a National School Lunch Program letter can walk directly into that store and have a hotspot shipped to them at absolutely no cost, with 5 years of 100 gigs per year of internet access for their students. So this is a really special commitment, Adam, and everyone kind of listening in. It is something that is very intentional. T-Mobile is not setting out to just put a program out there and maybe someone will take advantage of it. There's a lot that's gone into marketing and just making sure that you know what's available to the student populations that have the need. So we're excited about this investment, and we hope to continue, you know, these type of great partnerships alongside our great partners with Faith Bautista and several other national organizations, and also you, Commissioner.
And you said you're 2 million in already? Is that what you said?
We are, yeah, 2 million. We're connected across all education programs, and then with Project 10 Million, there's an additional over 400,000 connected. And of that total number, about 500,000 are right in California.
Wow, that's terrific. Well, so we have the first question from the audience, and Dr. Taylor, it's to you. So I'm going to introduce Mark Vickers from the New Road School, who is in the audience and has a question.
Thank you, Adam. I really appreciate it, and thank you all for your time today. It's such a privilege and a pleasure to be here. Dr. Taylor, I loved your description as a forever educator, and I certainly see myself as that as well. I'm from New Road School in Santa Monica in California, and my question to you is, we've had this incredible moment of disruption in our world in so many different ways. And where do you and T-Mobile see the biggest positive impact opportunities for the education of LMI students and their educators in a post-COVID world?
It's interesting you asked that, Mark. And you know, those of us who've been working in instructional technology for most of our careers have been almost battling for a day when all students had connectivity and devices for several years, right? You know, there's been a lot of changes with regard to infrastructure in schools and making sure that every school has Wi-Fi access that's adequate and can support the number of devices that are coming in. But now we're in a position to really create an innovative structure. You know, it's kind of like when you think about, you know, the lights coming on, it makes me think of you, Mr. Kenney. But, you know, there was a time when we had to light a candle to make lights in a room, right? And then there was a time you walk in and you can pull a string, and then eventually you can flip a switch, and now you walk in and the lights just know you're there. And this is the opportunity we're facing right now, right? It's an opportunity to really create and innovate in a way that's very special. And so T-Mobile is tasked with going above and beyond and saying, you know, what does a 5G strategy look like? What does innovation look like in partnership with education? Because the reality is that we're not going back to a traditional environment that does not embrace technology. We really have opened up a window of opportunity for our students, our teachers, and the education community that allows us to embrace the disruption, right? And to create structures that cater to students that don't have a traditional experience, right? There are, in reality, students who benefit more from learning online or from having the flexibility, right? There are students who are workers, who are parents, who are contributors to our society in very special ways. And I think with the onset and acceptance of virtual learning as an adequate solution, it's a real opportunity for T-Mobile and other providers to step up and say, how do we want to support not only the academic achievement, but the whole student achievement of the learner, right? If we're not addressing the core impacts of the pandemic with our students, unfortunately, there won't be academic success, right? There won't be the success that we're measuring as a parameter of how successful our departments of education are and how we're investing funding. So this is a really critical time for us to get in and support flexibility and support the wraparound services that really help our students to be successful. And what better way to do it than through innovative technology? Most of the careers won't exist, you know, if we don't support the learners that are here now. And they will be creating the over 60, you know, % of jobs that just aren't here today. So we're here to support that. I hope that answers your question, Mark.
That is just such a wonderful answer, and it really does. And I think a big part of this is how we are going to measure what success looks like for these students and young people. And I think looking at how we measure based on the needs of humans, not just industry. And I think that's going to be a big challenge. So you've touched on so many points, and I really appreciate your time and wisdom today.
You're so welcome. Looking forward to talking with you again, sir.
Indeed. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dr. Taylor, and thank you, Mark, for your question. You know, technology is complicated, but hopefully some of the solutions are simple. There, you know this, Dr. Taylor, but there is beauty in simplicity. Exactly. And so thank you for simple solutions to complex problems. We really appreciate it. Let me turn to something that is even more complex. Commissioner Shiroma touched on PSPS events, a term that we didn't know even had a meaning until a few years ago. And you know, I think the environment and the need for clean energy is a global issue, but no more pronounced, obviously, than what folks are facing in California. As California continues to work towards providing homes with cleaner and more efficient energy in pursuit of climate change goals, what has the CPUC done to balance the state's goal and at the same time provide more affordable utility service during the pandemic?
This has been very important. Your question has been very important because a knee-jerk reaction might have been to stop all efforts on clean energy progress with the notion that it's more expensive. Okay. However, one of the themes that we have is dispelling incorrect notions. All right. We have a tall goal of 2045 to get to a zero greenhouse gas footprint. This is an important effort for our future. California is one state. Although California has the 5th largest gross domestic product in terms of manufactured goods, agricultural goods, 5th in United States is 1st, China 2nd, Japan 3rd, Germany 4th, California 5th. And so that we really have a view that we can do a lot of problem solving. And while we are one state and have set out some very strong goals, that what we do in California will have influence with our sister states and our sister countries. Right? So all of us collectively must do our part, because climate change is real. Climate change is here. I think that there are some members of the military who may be in the audience. The military leadership of the United States has been saying for many years now that we have to pay attention to climate change. And so in California itself, yes, we've got these wind events that are creating the need for public safety power shutoffs, because our electricity grid relies heavily upon transmission lines, above ground transmission lines that in the past have been very steady, very strong. But with the climate change, things have changed indeed for us. So what we have done is everything has to be metric driven. And recently we had something called en banc. It's kind of a fancy name for a workshop where all 5 commissioners are able to attend. Our staff put together a paper on what is the trend for rates in California. And we see that, in fact, the rates that we have approved for the utilities are higher than the cost of living. Right? And one of the key reasons is because wildfire mitigation costs are borne by utility customers. And those wildfire mitigation costs include not only changing the ways that utilities do their business, it's vegetation management, it's the hardening of the system. And we also looked at, well, what about the electrification programs, building electrification, solar, renewable energy, and so forth. And our staff paper can be found at our website, cpuc.ca.gov. And at this point, preliminarily, what we see is that the rates are higher, tend to be higher than other areas of the United States. The bills themselves are actually not going up as high. I mean, there's a math to this, but the bills themselves are not the highest in the nation. We want to keep it that way. We want to definitely assure that we're controlling costs. Now, in looking at what can we do for the future, in fact, Mr. Kenney, Robert participated in this on behalf of Pacific Gas and Electric. Ideas are bubbling forward to cost containment and what have you. Maybe there's a different way to pay for some of these things. But I think a lot of what we need to do, honestly, is to be very intentional in seeing that everything that the CPUC is approving has a price tag to it, and it has an impact on customers. We are keenly aware that if a customer's bill goes up by $5, that could mean one less loaf of bread, for the month. And so, and there is much more to do. I don't have the, 3 to 5 easy answers to how we look at cost containment, except to say that our clean energy goals are not what's driving the costs. It is that climate change is already here and utilities are having to cope with that, all geared back to what has been said by Dr. Taylor, by Mr. Kenney, that it is about reliability, safety, a quality of life that we aspire to for our folks here in California, certainly across the nation. And to do that, we have to cope with what climate change is already doing to us with the fire dangers, wind dangers, and what have you. So there is no specific answer today, except to say that we are confident that we can and must continue towards our clean energy goals. And in doing that, we will work very keenly with our regulated industries to see where can we be the most efficient with the customer dollars, and honestly, are there also ways that we can save money or find different ways to finance what needs to be done to take care of our massive infrastructure in California. Thank you.
Thank you. 2045, that will be the year of my 80th birthday. So I'm hoping that you get there, and I'm hoping that I am there to see it. And I'm hoping that if you make it, Faith will have a birthday party for me. So a lot of things to look forward to. Mr. Kenney, can you talk a little bit about clean energy and the conservation measures communities in California, or that PG&E is undertaking, and some of the measures that communities in California should know about that are available through your company?
Yes, thanks for the question. I just want to maybe talk a little bit about a couple of things that Commissioner Shiroma highlighted. I think
Sure.
it is important because it does relate to clean energy, and we have been at PG&E leaders in clean energy deployment for many, many decades. We're very pleased that we met and exceeded our 33% RPS goal. If you count our hydro and our nuclear fleet, we're at 88% GHG free. And so we are very supportive of California's, our shared climate goals. Candidly, I won't say that they're just California's, they're ours. And so we're very supportive of being leaders in combating climate change. And this issue of rates, Commissioner Shiroma is right. Our rates are increasing. We have the benefit of our bills as being compared to the national average still being not increasing at the same rate. And a lot of that's because of temperate climate in some parts of the state. But there are parts of our service territory where bills are becoming unaffordable and are becoming unsustainable. And one of the other risks that we will run if our bills and our rates keep increasing is that we will threaten the economic viability of other electrification efforts that we are promoting. And so what I mean by that, if electric rates continue to rise, transportation electrification becomes less attractive because the fuel to power your EV will become more expensive. Building electrification will become less attractive if rates continue to rise. And so it's absolutely a matter of protecting our customers, but it's also a matter of protecting California's ability to achieve its climate goals by making electricity remain affordable. And so we're working really hard to do the things that we can do to drive costs out of the business, to be more efficient, and to find other ways to raise revenue to offset increased rates that we expect as a result of wildfire-related spending that we will be doing. So we've announced that we're selling our downtown headquarters, which we believe will raise money that can be returned to our customers. We've also found constructive and creative deals that we were able to make use of our transmission towers by engaging in a lease deal with SBA Communications that will generate revenue that we will be able to share with our customers. And so we're absolutely committed to making sure that we're driving costs out of the business. And I am very intrigued and very supportive of what Commissioner Shiroma just alluded to in terms of finding potentially other sources to fund a lot of the programs that we're having to fund. And so let me just talk a little bit about the other programs that we have with respect to energy efficiency. Commissioner Shiroma already talked about the ESA program, the Energy Savings Assistance Program that provides funds for weatherization and for energy efficiency upgrades to appliances. That's a very important program because not only does it contribute to meeting our helping combat climate change, but it also serves as a way in which our customers are able to drive down their costs. We have also been promoting, and you'll see this on our website, all the ways in which customers can get control of their bills while they're home using more. And significantly, it's things that you would imagine, unplugging appliances that you're not using, taking advantage of the ESA program, or taking advantage of making sure that your house is weatherized and energy efficient. Making sure that you keep your house at an optimal temperature, 78 degrees in the summer if you're able. We offer rebate programs for programmable thermostats so that you can make it easier to control your climate. Air conditioning is obviously a big draw and a big part of the load. And so to the extent that you can deploy that new technology to maintain control of your air conditioning, that's another option that's available to you. So we have a variety of different programs that are available to customers to help them control their usage and to use energy more efficiently.
Great. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but I do have a couple more questions, one or two from the audience. If we could get some quick answers to these, we could cover just a couple of other things before we conclude. One was a question I was going to ask Dr. Taylor. It came from an anonymous attendee, but it was a similar question that I had. T-Mobile announced a new program called Magenta Edge to help minority-owned small businesses succeed by providing them with free education and tools. Can you talk a little bit about that program and how it's helping minority communities?
Sure. So Magenta Edge this past year has highlighted the deep inequities we spoke about a little bit earlier. Magenta Edge provides free education programs, original stories, and insights that all entrepreneurs can find useful and helpful to succeed. It's really about making sure that we're supporting diversity in business, right? And in small business particularly. So a lot of really great stories there. There is a T-Mobile site that's been stood up just for Magenta Edge, and it's all about access and resources. So that is available to you right now. And T-Mobile is here to support small business, particularly as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, I know we have a number of NDC and NAAC members who come from, who are diverse small business owners. So I think that's terrific, and I'm sure they'll be interested in hearing more about the program. Pastor Jack had a question, and I'm going to ask it for him, and maybe I'll open it up to anybody to answer. He wanted to know, how do you measure if and how the resources and support services that we've been talking about are maximized? And particularly, how do you know if they're being maximized by the most marginalized consumers? Open that up to anybody to respond.
I know we're short on time, Adam. I just want to chime in. I do have to jump to a United Way meeting with 200 kids waiting for me. But I just thank you all so much for having me on the panel. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. We'll just take a couple of more minutes. Commissioner Shiroma and Mr. Kenney, if each of you want to respond, it looks like both of you have something to say on that topic.
You first, Commissioner.
I'm sorry. You know what? I'm going to defer to Robert to go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Did you
Well,
have something you wanted?
Oh.
Did you have to run also? Did you want?
No,
or-
well, and actually, I'll tell you what, here, since I'm sure Robert's would say, no, I'm going to defer to you. You're the commissioner. Okay. As I mentioned before, everything is metric driven. And by being metric driven, it has to be granular. And so we have efforts to use, well, it's the Tableau framework insofar as California with various overlays of maps to basically assessing what do we know in terms of census tracts, what do we know in terms of the customer makeup, as far as when Robert says, 96% of the folks that qualify for the discount program, that's been exceeded to 110%, that is based on what the knowledge of the customer base, not only for energy, but also for water, also for telecommunications, for the Lifeline program. We have a pretty good sense that only 40% of the folks who qualify, for the Lifeline program have signed up. And that's one of the highest rates in the country, okay? One of the highest. And so we have a lot more work to do. We have overlays of where are the disadvantaged communities based on air pollution. Again, the census tracts for low income families. And with all of these pieces of information, we are more informed on where do we need to spend more of our resources and our time and energy. And so with that, let me pass the microphone over to Robert.
Thanks, Commissioner. So I'll be brief because I know we're short on time, but in addition to the tools that Commissioner Shiroma just described, those are very quantitative, data-driven tools, and those are absolutely tools that we take advantage of as well. We also talk to our customers. We have a variety of advisory groups that touch on all aspects of our community. We have a very vast and broad service territory. And so we work with advisory groups. We have a small business consultation advisory group. We have a people with disabilities and aging advisory council. We have local stakeholder advisory groups all throughout our service territory. And those are about 16 that are made up of 250 community stakeholders, local policymakers, nonprofit and business leaders. And then we have a statewide California Community Advisory Group. We have a Community Wildfire Safety and Emergency Response Advisory Group and a Communities of Color and Access and Functional Needs Advisory Group. And we solicit feedback from those groups. I think you'll hear by the description that I just gave, or the titles, that they represent a very diverse group and mix of our customer base. And so we solicit their input and we make sure that we're not developing any type of outreach plans in a vacuum, that we're developing our outreach plans in consultation with the people that are intended to be beneficiaries of those programs. And so that's a very significant tool for us in informing our charitable giving and in informing where we're going to direct our various resources.
Thank you. I'm going to end on just one last question that I have from an anonymous attendee who asked, which I think is a great wrap-up question, and really just one sentence if you could. The question was, what do you think the biggest lesson you and your colleagues have learned from this pandemic? Robert, why don't you start, and we'll end with you, Commissioner.
One sentence is that we have the opportunity to be forces for good, and that we have to learn to be flexible and nimble in responding to unforeseen circumstances.
Well said. Absolutely. Commissioner, to you.
I think what it is in the theme that Robert has presented so importantly, is that, and I'll speak as a Californian, right? Regulatory agencies such as mine, we need to keenly understand on all four corners of the state the diversity of the state, ethnically, economically, geographically, and in understanding our state, it makes us better prepared for natural disasters, for health disasters, and what have you. And in being prepared to have those disaster preparedness plans in place that can be immediately taken off the shelf, and in implementing those plans to be very nimble and very flexible, absolutely. I think a year ago, that is what we did. And in working with all of the stakeholders as well, it's very important to work with the stakeholders. But the first thing is understand your base. If you understand your base, then you can more keenly and quickly help and mitigate whatever disaster comes your way. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be
Well,
a part
thank
of
you.
this
Thank you.
discussion.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your time. To Dr. Taylor, had to jump to Robert Kenney, and to you, Commissioner Shiroma. It's a pleasure to spend this hour or a little more than an hour with you, to hear from you all. Before I wrap up, I would just again, it is Women's History Month, as we know, and NDC is equipped with strong women. Who has been more important in California in our recent history than Faith Bautista. And so, Faith, I want to recognize you. Jin Sung, your tremendous leadership. And it's also nice to see how you all are growing a strong group of young women underneath you as well. Prachi Kohli, you did a great job putting together this panel. Debbie Lee Ruiz, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be with you all today, and I look forward to seeing everyone again real soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We didn't get to introduce Adam Falk. Adam Falk is the Vice President of State Government Affairs at Charter Communications since January 2015. And Charter is the second largest cable operator in the United States, serving roughly 21 million customers in the United States. Adam, I will celebrate your birthday when you turn 80, because I will be 82 years old by then. And by that time, everyone will be using electrical vehicle. And thank you. And Commissioner Shiroma, when you were talking, I have goosebumps, because I have never been living in this country since 1981. Never been really scared to go out since this Asian hatred. Yesterday, I was on Chron 4, Channel 4 in the Bay Area, because our headquarters is in Daly City, and our elderly person there got beaten up. And it's just not fair. We're as beautiful as anybody is. We're as hardworking as anybody is. We're good neighbors. So, throughout this day, and thank you for everyone for denouncing the Asian hatred. It's been around for so long. I've been advocating for this since I've been community leader for 2000. And actually, it's really sad. And this is the reality now. My mentor, Bob Ginesta, always told me that, Faith, you'll always be underserved. And that's the nature of being Asian. And I'm not going to accept that anymore. It's about time that the Asian will be recognized. We've been invisible community, not anymore. So Commissioner Shiroma, thank you for doing this for us. PG&E, thank you for sympathizing with us. T-Mobile, that project 10 million, let's give that to more underserved community. And Charter, thank you for always being with us. So thank you.